again. I don't remember how long it's been, but Jeremy says, I said, you have new seats, new chairs, and he said, no, not really, that's been about 2 years. So obviously it's been a little over 2 years since I've been here, but I want you to know you win the award for the most comfortable seats in the Mission Center. I really like these seats. Maybe this means that people will sit down sooner when they come to preach. I mean, one never knows. You can hope. I guess that's the answer there. You know, I usually don't wear this kind of outfit to preach in. At least I hope you've noticed I don't usually wear this when I come. But there is method to my madness today. And so I'm going to scoot this a little bit if I may, so I get to both groups here. I am hoping that you will see the connectedness of why I'm wearing this outfit and what we have to say about called to mindfulness today as our theme. I am a fan of football. I raised a son and grandsons, and I learned that football is important to a lot of people out there in the world, and so I started watching it, and I liked it, and so I became a fan. I became such a fan of a certain football team that I think you can probably figure out here, that I actually bought a plane ticket, and along with my nieces and nephews, we reserved an Airbnb in Atlanta, Georgia last year, because they were born and raised in New Orleans, and we were sure that the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, so much so that we bought the airplane ticket and we got our Airbnb. Well, needless to say, we gave up the Airbnb. I'm sure some wonderful group enjoyed it a lot. Right near the stadium, it looked really good in the pictures. And we all used our airplane tickets to go elsewhere around. So that didn't work out too well, but we were still fans, and we'll be fans this year, and we'll see what happens again. If you followed the preseason, you say, well, they hadn't really done too well in the preseason. The preseason is really not for the real players that have been on that team for a while. That's to see how well the new people play. Yeah. And one of the things that's nice about being a fan is if you're watching the game and the game's getting a little boring, they're not making as many touchdowns as you'd like, and different things happening, and you get a whiff of hot dogs, kind of in the air. You can get up, you can go to the concession stand, you can get the hot dog, you can come back, you can look at the scoreboard and say, oh yeah, they didn't score any better than when I left, or if they did, okay, who got the touchdown? You can ask the people around you, So a fan can come and go. A fan can enjoy it, and then if something else moves them that they want to go and do, they can go and do it. The difference is if you're on the team, it doesn't work that way. If you're on the team, you've got to be fully engaged. And one of the things coaches look for in preseason is which players are fully engaged and getting it. Who can play in different positions, and you saw them move some of those guys around. They wanted to see, where do you feel most at home? And it's easy in practice because you're practicing with your own people. But when you get out there on the field, you don't know what that other team is going to do. And you've got to be ready to play that play that you thought was going to be so great. But all of a sudden, there's all these people interfering with that play, and you've got to know where to go and move and how to move that ball along. And yesterday was the last day where they made up the roster of who made it and who didn't in all those plays. You probably had figured out who might make it because they really looked good. They looked dedicated. They looked like they were fully engaged, and they really knew what was going on in that field. That's the kind of player that every coach looks for. And you can't blame them. I mean, that's the kind of player that wins games. But all those players started out as fans of football, but they decided it was time in their lives, in some way or another, to become fully engaged and to really be a part of the game. And they're not the only ones in their lives that get fully engaged. And one of those, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples from our regular lives, where we have a choice whether we become fully engaged or not. And of course, I'll start with school teaching. I mean, you might as well start with something you know. It would be kind of nice. I worked with a lot of student teachers over the years. And the interesting thing is they really want to do their lesson well. And they're just starting out. And I would call them a fan of teaching. You know, they decided this looks like, you know, and why do you want to be a teacher? I love children. Well, a lot of people can love children. Does not necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy teaching them. You can love them plenty and still wonder every once in a while why you signed up to be a teacher. But, you know, as you go through this idea that you're going to be a teacher, the day comes where they're going to let you stand up in front of a class. And you know what you have to do in that lesson. You have the points, you have the objective, and you have it, you know, you have a little cheat sheet maybe, you know, so that you can look on. You know, we all have one of those, by the way. You know, that never hurts to have it, to look down and make sure you're doing the things you wanted in the right order. But they're going to get up there and they're going to look like they're ready to go. And so they get up there, and this is the way they teach that very first time. They teach like this. And so I'm going to go through my first objective, and then I'm going to tell you my second objective, and then I'm going to tell you my third objective. And you're thinking, look around, you know, look at the students, you know, because to be fully engaged, you need to know what those students are getting and what they're not. And there are some kids that are going there, you know, and you know, I better go back over that because I'm not, somewhere along the line, I better change the example, I better do something because something's not working right. You also know, and this is always a wonderful trick of teachers, that there are children that are about to do something that is not quite kosher, you know, and they're going to look at you before they do it. And so they make a quick motion. Well, what you see if you're scanning the room is you see the quick motion. And then you just look at them and go. Yeah. And they think that you are the most psychic human being that ever walked the face of the earth. Now, you have no idea what they're going to do, but you know it wasn't going to be good. You know, and it certainly wasn't following any rule that you know, so you just say no. But then there's the child that is so mad at the person sitting next to them or a person a few feet away that they're just going to lash out and get them. And they're not going to give you any pre-signal. But you're starting to look at their faces. You see it in their eyes. You see it in the clench of the fist and the jaw. And so, you know, you get back there and you keep teaching the lesson, but you're standing right by them. And, you know, we don't touch children right now. I mean, that will probably pass and we'll get back to something semi-reasonable. But, you know, so now what you do is you either put your hand out like this or you just put it on the desk. Let them know, hi, I'm here. But because you can't say that because you're still teaching the lesson, you know. So, but, you know, you're giving out all these things. That's what it means to be fully engaged. And let me tell you, every classroom, when a new teacher comes in and stands up to teach, those students are watching. You know, they want to know, are you going to be fully engaged with us or aren't you? And if you're not, this will be a time for all of us to have some fun. And so you learn, if you're going to be a successful teacher, you better learn how to scan. And you better make sure that everybody is with you somewhere along the line. it's probably not going to be a profession that you are going to feel good about. You can still admire teaching. You can still act as though this would have been a great major for me, maybe. But I don't think I want to do it every day for the rest of my life, because somehow or other I can't get fully engaged. But your successful teachers, they're the ones that are fully engaged. Your successful football players, the ones that are fully engaged. My daughter, my youngest daughter, worked in Colorado for a while as a mail order clerk for a prescription company. And you don't need any great pharmaceutical degree, and you don't need to be any medical person at all. They hire you and they say, here's the medication that you're supposed to fill for this person. And you look at the name, and then you go match the name with the alphabetical set that's on the shelves. You pick it up, you look and see what the dosage is, and so you get the right dosage, and you get the right number, because they'll tell you the number that you're supposed to have in there. A 30-day supply, a 90-day supply, whatever. And you fill the prescription. Now, what I'm going to tell you, this was the group she worked for, and this was, some time ago. I would hope that these statistics might be a little better now. But only 84% of those prescriptions originally filled were correct. 16% were not correct. Just get that in your mind for a little minute or two or three. My daughter, and I brag, you know how this goes, hers was a 98% correctness. And so the supervisor came to her and said, they always have to have what they call a double check. Somebody has to double check so that those 16% don't actually get out to the people. Would you be willing to be one of those checkers? And, okay. She said it didn't take much concentration. She could, a lot of medications are used by a lot of people, same medications. And so, there's just a few blood pressure meds, and so you learn which little insignia, tiny little thing there is for each one of those. And if it says it's going to be telemessarin or whatever, you know what that looks like. And the interesting thing she says is the different dosages, either the pill gets larger as the dose gets larger, or if the actual size of the pill stays the same, and I didn't know this until she started working, but I think it's fascinating, the color of the pill becomes a little darker as the dosages go up. So she said it's pretty quick, to figure out if somebody got it wrong or not. And she said, and you learn what 30 pills look like, and what 90 pills look like, and 60 pills, you can get that pretty fast. But she said she was always amazed at how many of these mistakes were made. And then she said, and then I began to realize why. And I want you to fill in these blanks for me. Some of those people were not fully engaged because not only were they had the sheet with what they needed for that patient to fill, but they all had something else in their hand. It was a cell phone. Yeah. And she said, it began to be, she had never took her cell phone with her. It was always in the car. She said, I began to realize they were hiding their cell phone underneath, the chair, the desk, wherever they were working. They were not fully engaged. They did not catch on that if their mistakes could kill somebody. Because their cell phone and their cute little messaging was more important than being fully engaged. quite a little commentary. On Friday, I had the opportunity to take one of my friends to her first chemo treatment. I had never been in a room when people were receiving chemo before, and it was quite a learning experience. She has a very aggressive type of cancer, and she was to undergo this very first treatment. She was to get really powerful chemical drugs. There were 4. She was there for 3 hours, and you know, they have a port. They put in the the vials via this port, and the first one starts, and then they come in, and I will say, you know, as they switched each bag, there was another person called a checker who came in to make sure that the nurse who was assigned to you was putting in the right one. You know, they realized that was important enough, you don't make a mistake. And so each one got a little stronger and a little stronger. So the last one in the 3rd hour was the strongest. And the nurse said, now when we put this in, you're going to start to feel numb, and you're going to start to feel your bones twitching and a tingling in your system. And so, you know, we're there, and my friend's scared. I'm scared for my friend. You know, my eyes are getting just as big as hers, realizing what was going on. So while this was going on, my friend said to the nurse, I have a medication that I need to know if I can take it now that I have these chemicals in my body. And the nurse said to her, well, you know, here's your sheets with your with your record. You know, you can look and see if it's on that list. If it's on the list, it means it's okay. Now here is my friend who's scared, who's nervous, whose body is starting to twitch and go numb. And this nurse hands her this, I would say it was probably a ½ inch thick to go through and look to see if her medication is mentioned anywhere in there. You know, and of course I wasn't allowed to look at it because there's that HIPAA law. You know, I can't look at what her program is, or, you know, what her medical history is or anything. So here's my friend going through it. Well, I guess she was taking a little bit longer than the nurse thought was good. So the nurse says to her, oh, it's always on the last page. Just turn to the last page and you can see your medical list, your prescriptions. So she turns to the last page, she looks down, and she said, this is my medication. So, and then so the nurse says, well, I guess it's okay for you to take it then. Now, you know, get a flavor for that. What this nurse was doing was just diddling around in the room while she expected somebody with this kind of a treatment to have to go look for herself where in a place where she didn't even know where to find the list of medications. And the nurse knew. The nurse knew. She'd look at the last page. Now, you know, what would a fully engaged nurse do in a situation like that? Knowing that a person has to be scared spitless to be in a situation with chemotherapy for the very first time and having it be in a really heavy chemotherapy. It would have taken her less time to say, well, I'm not sure, let's check. It will be in your record, and I have your record right here. Flip to that back page, see that medication was mentioned. Say, you don't have to worry, it's right here. It means you can take it, you'll be fine. Now, to my friend's credit, this is where I would not probably have had the guts to do this. But at the end of all this, as the nurse was taking out all these tubes and everything, she says, now, that wasn't, you're all finished for today. That wasn't so bad, was it? And my friend said, you have not been a nurse to me today. And proceeded to tell her that she wanted a fully engaged nurse. Now, that took guts. But to be fully engaged means you leave yourself and you become a part of a team, part of others. You are no longer just existing for yourself, but whatever you are doing, whatever occupation you're in, you see the world as God sees it. You see it through the eyes of the people that you are working with and for. And all of our occupations, we can do that. Jesus in Luke 14 talks about the same thing, but he talks about it a little differently. So we're going to read it from the Bible here. Luke 14, it says, "One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being watched carefully by those who were also present." Now, apparently, in that day and time, you didn't have name cards, and people didn't tell you where to sit. You came and then vied for positions of prominence when you got there. You didn't see any of us fighting to be up front, but I guess in those, if you use that analogy, we should be fighting to see who was, going to come in first and who comes in second, and all that good stuff. But anyway, apparently in the Jewish tradition, that was how it was done. And so Jesus, when he noticed how the guests were picking the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. "When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, 'Give this man your seat.' Then, humiliated, you will have to take the lesser seat. Get up and take the least important place in the room. But when you are invited, instead, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, 'Friend, move up to a better place.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. And this is the biggie, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." To come back to that, let's take the football analogy again. Last night I watched the Mizzou game with Wyoming. I don't know if anybody got to see that, but we didn't win that one either. We're not doing all that whippy, apparently, in the state of Missouri right now. That can change if we, quote, learn how to work together as a team and be fully engaged. But the team in Wyoming, one of the people watching the game with us said, and noticed that the team did not have their names on their jerseys. They just had their number. And she said, "I wonder what in the world's going on there." And then I remembered Joe Paterno at Penn State when he was the famous coach there. When he first took over, he had a lot of players who thought they were really something. They were the big guys. They made it to Penn State. Oh, they were so lucky. And Penn State was lucky to have them. And he thought, I've got to build a team. I've got to make sure these people who think they're so exalted understand that you humble yourself and work together. And so Joe Paterno was the first coach that took the names off the jerseys. And Penn State for years was the only football team, college football team, that had only the number. Of course, you have to have the number because the officials have to be able to say number 12, you ran the wrong way. And I mean, they have to be able to call you out with something, so they kept the number. But his big thing was, we are a team. We don't need to know your personal name, because you are humbled enough to be a part of a total team. This isn't who gets their name out in front of everybody else. He understood that the exalted need to be humbled, and those who are humbled will, in the end, be the winners. And Penn State has had their share of championships ever since, in that sense. And I guess Wyoming won over us, so I guess that they're on their way to understanding that little feat as well. Lest you think that sometimes in our own fully engaged work, we don't have the chance to show a sense of humbleness. I have a friend who's a factory worker, and he works on the assembly line. And a few years ago, the assembly line had a new partner join them. And they have all these workers around, doing whatever they do on the assembly line, to make everything work. And the top administration of that particular company, which will go unnamed for this story, and so I'm keeping everybody kind of, without real names, so that you protect the innocent and guilty at the same time. They introduced this new member to the team. It was a robot. And you can imagine if you are sitting there on an assembly line and here comes a robot who is doing the same job you're doing. Now that robot does not have to have a lunch hour. That robot does not need a restroom break. That robot can go for 24 hours and just be as eager to keep working at the 24th hour as that robot was the first hour. And you can imagine some of those people, that seat at the banquet table, the seat at the conveyor belt, they were mad. They were scared. What am I going to do for a job? Because if you can bring in one robot, it doesn't take too much in the brain to realize they're going to start bringing in other robots. And my friend said there were some people that decided to sabotage the robot. So they disabled it in some way so it didn't work. So the administration comes down, they say, okay, we'll have to call the computer company that programmed this robot, see what's missing, what went wrong. And my friend said, I have a choice. I can be fully engaged with this company and say that the product we're making matters and be a part of that company in a new way. Or I can sit and decide if I'm going to work with the sabotaging the next robot. Yeah. But he saw that it's a matter of time. And so what he did is and it took about a week for the computer company to get their representative there and get this robot fixed. And he said the thing that happened that meant so much is that he watched how the guy fixed the robot. Well, they sabotaged another one, and so he watched how the guy fixed that robot. And then the third time, when somebody thought it was cute again, he went to the administration and he quietly said, we don't really have to wait a week. I think I know how to fix the robot. And the administration said, great, go for it. And he fixed the robot. There's one person from that assembly line that still works for that company. He humbled himself. He made himself more humble than a robot. We're not always living just with people. In this day and age, we're living with other things, robots even. And he said what he learned was the company began to value his contribution because he saw where the vision was going. He saw where there was a need, and I will become fully engaged in that need. He started studying, how do you fix robots? How do you do some of this stuff? And he learned how to program on his own. And they have him as their expert now on that assembly line working with those robots. I too needed to be humble. We all have a sense of who we are, and isn't it great? I have a little dog named Bentley. Some of you know he's a service dog, but he's also a therapy dog, and he goes out and reads with children in the schools. The children actually read with him. He just sits there. He puts his head on their book as they read. They think he really is watching them read. Now, what I know is he's just resting his head. But they get into this with him. And one time, this little boy looked down and said, "Bentley, I don't know this word." And so I said, well, if Bentley could talk, Bentley would tell you the word is, and then I said the word. And then he turns and says, "Thank you, Bentley." And I'm there thinking, wait a minute. I was the one who taught, no, I didn't say that. I realized that, to those kids, I'm not really there. I drive a dog. That's what I do. I drive the dog so the dog gets there. But I need to learn to be humble and let a dog do the work that needs to be done. We all, if we're going to be fully engaged, need to see that sometimes to make the team work well, we need to step back and be fully engaged without everybody knowing who we are or what we're doing. As a Christian, a lot of us are fans. A lot of us wear jewelry that shows that we're fans. But God is calling us to be fully engaged in His work, to see the world as God sees it, to realize when we have a banquet, when we come to any kind of operation anywhere, that we need to humble ourselves and say, how would God see this incident right now? I don't have to be the end-all and be-all, but I've got to be on God's team. I've got to be fully engaged in what God would have us do. And as we take the communion today, let us rededicate ourselves to be fully engaged as a Christian, to get in there and not just be a fan, but be a part of the team. In Doctrine and Covenants 164, it says, "The challenges and opportunities are momentous. Will you remain hesitant in the shadows of your fears, your insecurities, and your competing loyalties?" Think cell phone. Think self-exaltations. Will you be hesitant? Will you let your fears, your insecurities, and your competing loyalties get in the way? Or will you move forward in the light of your divinely instilled call and vision? If you learn to walk in my way, you will become the people you are called to be. The mission of Jesus Christ is what matters most for the journey.